We might focus on actual issues that are actually bringing the country down, but that's the whole purpose for these social media wars and these culture wars that they're pushing on everyone is stop thinking about what's actually destroying your life. Stop thinking about the wages that it's being stolen from you. Stop thinking about the fact you have no health care and you're stressed out about it. Stop thinking about the fact your kids can't even go to school without paying exorbitant amounts of money. What are we gonna do in the future? Who cares? There's gay people across the street, or not even across the street, downtown at some event that you went and found them at. Anyways, a couple thoughts before we get out of here. We have like a couple seconds. I told you guys to shout out at me. Lynn, 2IT member, says, I guess an apple a day doesn't keep the doctor away. Well, absolutely not. The doctor has to do a lot more reconstructive type of surgeries. Twitch, Suspicious Dragon 92, what's up? Says, every sheriff in Florida trying to be a Grady Judd or Wayne Ivey. Grady Judd, I'm not as familiar with, but Wayne Ivey for sure. He's trying to jail a bunch of people as possible. Over on YouTube, you guys, some comments there. Neil Mick says, I'll go with not well thought out plans for $60, Alex. Again, I think this is the guy up in Pennsylvania jumping off of second floor storied windows onto people. And I guarantee you, Sharon, you'll be thinking about it next time you're in the mall. Thank you for joining us on the show, Sharon. I appreciate you. Be careful out there, you guys. Make sure you look up before you come outside of the edge of these mall raptors. Thanks, Sharon. Hope we see you soon, as usual. And also thank you guys for being with me as well. Up next, we have the Young Turks. Annika Asperin leads that first hour for solo time. And then here comes John Idaho to join her for the second hour. Should be a fun time. We'll see you guys tomorrow on this show.
gonna blow your mind on the show today. That's what we're gonna do. That's what this show is about, blowing minds. Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and boy, do we have a show for you. I'm super excited for the first hour and the second hour today, along with the bonus episode, which of course John Idarola will be joining me for. But in the first hour today, we're going to talk to someone from UPS about a very possible massive strike among UPS workers this summer. What is the current conflict between UPS workers, the union, and the company itself? We're gonna get to the details. I promise you, you will definitely appreciate that conversation and that interview, so stick around for that. We're also gonna talk about a growing percentage of young Americans who are not only fine with government surveillance, but would even be okay with the government installing cameras in our homes. That blew me away. I can't wait to share that story with you. And later in the hour, we'll also talk about Chris Licht. Yes, he has decided to step down as CEO of CNN. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, but I do wanna give you my take. And we'll also discuss corporate CEOs in the healthcare industry and just how they were able to milk US taxpayers to essentially provide more funds for corporate stock buybacks to become even more wealthy than they already were. Don't miss that story either. But before we get to all of that, just want to encourage you to like and share the stream if you're watching us live. You can also help support the show by becoming a member by going to tyt.com/join. Or if you're happy to watch us on YouTube, you can click on that join button and become a member that way. Members get exclusive, members only content. They help to keep us afloat and independent from any corporate influence. And I'll always be grateful to our members for giving me a voice and giving me the freedom to say what I feel I need to say on this show. With that said, let's get to our first story. A new national survey by the Cato Institute finds that a pretty shocking percentage of young Americans are totally fine with the government of the United States installing literal surveillance cameras in every household in an effort to reduce domestic violence, abuse, and other illegal activity. Look, before we get to the depressing numbers, it's worth breathing in a sigh of relief as we take a broader view of how Americans in general feel about the government monitoring us. The exact same survey reveals that 3 in 4 Americans, luckily, oppose installing government surveillance cameras in all homes. So you can take a look at that pie chart and it shows you that while 75% of Americans oppose such creepy big government measures, big brother measures, only 14% of survey takers are in favor of installing the cameras in people's homes. 10% apparently haven't thought too much about it and answered that they don't know. Okay, now, once the responses from the survey takers were divided by age, things start to get worrying, to say the least. Americans under the age of 30 stand out when it comes to 1984 style in-home government surveillance cameras. In fact, 3 in 10, 29% of Americans under the age of 30 favor the government installing surveillance cameras in every household in order to reduce domestic violence, abuse, and other illegal activity. Support declines with age, dropping to 20% among 30 to 44-year-olds and dropping considerably to 6% among those over the age of 45. There were other pretty shocking findings in this survey. When the responses were broken down based on race, for instance, those who have been most concerned with systemic racism are actually the most receptive toward home surveillance by the very government they accuse of creating systems of oppression. It just doesn't really make much sense. Cato found that 25% of Hispanic and 33% of Black respondents favor the government installing surveillance cameras in every household to reduce domestic violence, abuse, and other illegal activity. Only 11% of Asians and 9% of whites feel the same way. Now, I remember the outrage liberals expressed after discovering that the Bush administration was engaging in warrantless wiretapping on Americans. They were similarly outraged when Edward Snowden blew the whistle on the National Security Agency indiscriminately spying on Americans. But today's liberals are apparently different because among various ideological categories, they happen to be the most likely to support government surveillance in our homes. Take a look at this. 19% of liberals and 18% of moderates approve of government cameras in our homes, meaning that combined, put the numbers together, 37% of liberals and moderates would greenlight the surveillance. That's insane. Those who are very liberal or conservative are actually the least likely to support it at 9%. So look, even Ryan Grimm, who was a reporter over at The Intercept, sheds light on this phenomenon by sharing a personal anecdote. On Twitter, he wrote the following. Just anecdotally, when we at The Intercept do these kinds of stories on civil liberties that have been our bread and butter since the founding of the site, they just don't land or travel with readers like they used to. Look, I totally get that tons of people have grown accustomed to intentionally oversharing details about their personal lives on social media. But however misguided that behavior might be, it's behavior that people are, opting into. And perhaps being watched and filmed endlessly by our neighbors, businesses, and local governments while we're in public spaces has lulled people into normalizing indiscriminate surveillance. Look, neither I nor the Cato Institute really know why there's a growing number of Americans who think that Big Brother watching us in our living rooms would somehow keep us safe. But look, not to get too harsh, if your brain has rotted so severely that you're under the impression that the government filming Americans in their own homes would somehow fight crime, maybe you should consider that there are plenty of crimes captured on camera in public spaces that maybe should be dealt with first. Also consider the panic that set in among large swaths of the electorate in 2016 as it became clear that Trump won the presidential election. Would the pro-surveillance squad be down with Trump or Gollum's spawn, Stephen Miller, spying in on what you're up to at home? That's the thing about Americans stupidly giving up their freedoms over promises of government protection. They tend to forget that their favored political party won't be in charge forever, and their role in concentrating power among government officials only helps to fast track us toward authoritarianism. And learning about history is important because it's the only way we can prevent repeating the same mistakes. You don't even have to go back far to see how our federal government has abused its power, especially when it comes to surveillance. The Bush administration was able to increase its power while decimating the civil liberties that we were enjoying through the Patriot Act following the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. Americans were terrified of another attack, and the Bush administration exploited that fear to pass the Patriot Act. But Bush went even further with warrantless wiretapping, meaning that the government could spy on Americans without probable cause and without obtaining a warrant from a judge. In fact, back then, ABC News had reported on this. This is a piece from October 8th of 2008. And back then they wrote this: despite pledges by President George W. Bush and American intelligence officials to the contrary, hundreds of US citizens overseas have been eavesdropped on as they called friends and family back home, according to two former military intercept operators who worked at the giant National Security Agency Center in Fort Gordon, Georgia. Now, the piece also highlighted the two individuals who were blowing the whistle on this. One of them you're about to hear about, Adrian Kine, a 31-year-old US Army Reserves Arab linguist assigned to a special military program at the NSA's Back Hall at Fort Gordon between November 2001 to 2003. She said that US military officers, American journalists, and American aid workers were routinely intercepted and collected on as they called their offices or homes in the United States. This was taking place as they were traveling abroad and calling in to the United States to connect with their family members and their loved ones. Now, Kine described the contents of these calls as personal, private things with Americans who are not in any way, shape, or form associated with anything to do with terrorism. That is what she said. Oh, but by the way, it gets worse. Let's get to the other whistleblower. Another intercept operator, former Navy Arab linguist David Falk, says he and others in his section of the NSA facility at Fort Gordon routinely shared salacious or tantalizing phone calls that had been intercepted, alerting office mates to certain time codes of cuts that were available on each operator's computer. Hey, check this out, Falk says he would be told. There's good phone sex. There's some pillow talk. Pull up this call. It's really funny. Go check it out. It would be some colonel making pillow talk, and we would say, wow, this was crazy. And you know what? He's right. It was crazy. It was crazy that the government was able to spy in on all Americans indiscriminately without even obtaining a warrant from a judge. In other words, these people unsurprisingly abused their power, and they did so under the false pretenses of keeping Americans safe. We have to look to history in order to learn valuable lessons from our past. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution makes clear that Americans should not be subjected to unreasonable searches. In fact, let's read from it right now. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I mean, it's pretty clear. There needs to be probable cause. Bush administration threw that out the window during his time in office. And the Obama administration, of course, did nothing about it once he came into power. But let's put all of that aside, the politics of it aside. The real issue here is that when you give the government too much power, when you give away your civil liberties because you believe that the government's gonna protect you, it's gonna backfire. Luckily, there are wonderful protections for Americans in our Constitution, and we have to protect our civil liberties. Trading our freedoms for shallow promises of safety didn't make sense in the past, and it definitely doesn't make sense today either. All right, we're gonna take a brief break. It's a little bit early, but I wanna get ready for the wonderful interview that we're about to have with a representative from UPS, a worker from UPS, I should say. It's gonna be a great conversation. There could be a massive historic strike this summer. So stick around, we'll share the details and that conversation with you when we return.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. You have to do corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country, so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Special thanks to our new member, Rochelle Hubert. Definitely appreciate you all becoming members, helping to support the show and the work that we're doing here. Thanks to you, we're able to have the conversations that we're about to have, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get right to that. This summer, some 350,000 UPS workers could walk off the job, making it the largest US strike in the 21st century. The last time UPS workers walked off the job was in 1997, when Ron Carey, president of the local 804 Teamsters, led 185,000 UPS Teamsters on strike. The strike would last a mere 15 days before the union was able to declare victory. While the country has not seen a strike of that size ever since, hundreds of thousands of UPS workers who are still represented by the local 804 Teamsters union are gearing up to change that. As with most impending strikes, the heart of the dispute is the UPS contract. The chief executive of UPS, Carol Tomé, argues that the company and the union aren't so far apart in their negotiations for a new 5-year contract. But considering that the workers are getting ready to walk off the job, one should be skeptical of her claims. According to local 804 president, Vinnie Perrone, UPS made a killing, an absolute killing during the coronavirus pandemic, and the workers deserve a piece of the pie. In fact, the company made record profits in 2022. Annual revenue is up 11% on average for each year of the pandemic. The company delivers more than 20 million packages a day in the United States, making it the second largest ground courier after the United States Postal Service. An estimated 6% of the country's gross domestic product moves through UPS. UPS drivers, UPS workers do an incredibly important job. And considering the increase in profits that UPS has been able to enjoy, I definitely agree that they deserve a piece of that pie. But there are other issues at play as well. Despite the company's success, executives at UPS did something that seems counterintuitive, but happens to be a pretty common business practice in an economic climate that places profit maximization over all else. UPS has been laying off and displacing workers, cutting hours and splitting shifts. One worker accustomed to working a straight 8-hour day says that he is now being told to work for 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours at night, upending his ability to get a good night's sleep, much less do anything else. Other UPS locals report the same problem. Now, contract negotiations began this past April, and the national master contract is set to expire on July 31st. What's really going on behind the scenes? How far apart are the employer and the union? And what's at the heart of the dispute? Luckily, here to discuss the dispute and the possibility of hundreds of thousands of UPS workers striking is Sean Orr, who is a UPS package car driver. Orr is also a member of Local 705 in Chicago and the co-chair of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean.
Thank you, Anna, for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. Really excited to talk to you about this and learn more. So look, something that really stands out to me is the tiered pay system involving so-called 22.4s, which was basically, it was implemented due to the 2018 contract, which was kind of forced upon you. We can get to that later, but tell me what the two-tiered pay system is really about.
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, the 22.4 driver job classification came in 2018. And that is essentially a flexible job position that UPS created. It is a package car driver, so like myself, the people who, the boys in brown, quote unquote, that go out, make deliveries every day. But anyone who has been hired as a package car driver since that last contract was forced through in 2018 has come in as a 22.4 driver. And this means a couple of things. One, it means that they make less pay than their fellow package car drivers who were hired before 2018. 22.4s cap out at about $9 less an hour. They do not have protection from forced overtime, which we call our 9-5 rights as package car drivers. And they can also be forced to work in the building doing split shifts like what you were talking about before bringing me in. So you have people who 1 week are out delivering for 55, 60 hours in all different types of conditions, delivering packages every single day. And then that very next week, they might be told, hey, you know what? Volume is quote unquote light. We have to cut routes, quote unquote. They plead poverty. Well, guess what? Now you have to come in and work from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the warehouse. Do you have kids? Well, guess what? You got to figure out someone else is going to take them to daycare. You got to figure out somebody else is going to be picking them up from school or picking them up from grandparents because you're going to be sleeping, you're going to be working. It totally upends people's lives. And the reason that UPS wanted this and that our union at the time agreed to it, unfortunately, is because the company wants more flexibility. They don't want to be guaranteeing package car drivers their 8-hour guarantee to go out and make deliveries. They don't like having that kind of strict, controlled workplace. That's what we like as workers, right? We like guarantees. The company doesn't like guarantees. The company wants to be able to treat us like Amazon treats its employees, like Uber and Lyft treat their employees, telling them, hey, you're starting at this time, you're ending at this time. It's going to change next week. You do what we tell you to do and you have to accept it. And you have to accept less pay than your coworkers. That's not right.
And I totally agree. I mean, those split shifts absolutely upend people's lives. I mean, they're not able to function as human beings if they have to come in for 4 hours, then they're off for, I don't know, a few more hours, and then they come back for another 4 hours. That's insane. But I think that employers do this kind of stuff intentionally, right? There's a reason why they prefer that two-tiered system, because what it ends up doing is it kind of sows discord and it kind of does away with the solidarity among workers that's really necessary to ensure that they're fighting together on behalf of workers. And I'm curious if you experienced a change in the climate at UPS among workers after that 2018 contract was signed?
I would definitely say so. I think that UPS really sowed its own demise with this contract fight because they were expecting people to just accept less, right? Because that, as a young worker, our whole generation has been raised to expect less and accept less, right? We're not going to have the same standards that our parents had or that our coworkers have who have higher seniority and are close to retirement. We have to accept the fact that conditions are changing, this economy is changing. You know what? You're lucky that you actually just have a full-time job. Most people are juggling multiple part-time gigs just to scrape by. And that's not what happened, right? Young workers like myself, I started as a 22-4 driver. Young workers like myself, we're not willing to accept that. Not only did we come into a situation where we had a militant union, a militant rank and file who fought back against that contract and had it forced on us anyways. We voted that contract down in 2018 and our union leadership at the time decided to sign it anyways. That's why they're not our union leadership anymore.
Okay, let's actually get to that right now because
for sure.
That backstory is so incredible and it's a story of awful leadership, but the rank and file actually fighting back against the awful leadership that led to that awful contract in 2018. So you guys were basically forced into signing that contract because of some arcane rule that James Hoffa decided to use. James Hoffa was the head of the general union. And what went on? Tell us the backstory.
Yeah, so we had James Hoffa Jr. was running our union. He'd been running since 1998, and he had negotiated concessionary contract after concessionary contract at UPS. This isn't a company that can plead poverty. This isn't a company that's about to shutter its doors. This is a company that has year after year continued to grow and continue to dominate the most dominant sector of the US economy. And yet he was signing off on concessionary contract after concessionary contract. And contracts kept on getting passed, but the no vote was getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single contract because people were getting fed up and a rank and file movement was building, led by TDU, which I'm a member of, and others in the reform movement. And in 2018, Hoffa put together a team of negotiators. It was led by Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman. And they were promising, we're going to do things different. We're going to be militant. We're going to negotiate openly and transparently with the membership. We're not going to have a brownout of information. And what did Hoffa do after they said that? They were fired. They were removed from the negotiating committee. He put in one of his lackeys. It was a total blackout of information. And what came out of the other side was this agreement. They had 22-4 drivers, they had part-timers still living in poverty, and they had a number of other unacceptable concessions. And we were fed up. And so in 2018, we voted that contract down. And this was a national movement that went against the leadership of our union. Our union was pushing hard for a yes vote. They said that they wanted to, quote unquote, keep UPS competitive. They wanted to, quote, collaborate more with the employer. Well, the membership didn't want that. So we voted that contract down. But like you said, Hoffa used an arcane rule in the IBT, the Teamsters Constitution, and he signed it anyways. And I remember that day so vividly. I was talking to my shop steward on the phone while we were out making deliveries. And we were talking about the fact that we couldn't believe that we just voted this contract down. 10 minutes after the contract vote came out, UPS went and gave a press conference where they said, we respect the vote of the Teamsters membership. This was not our last, best, and final offer. We are ready to return to the table. And then as I was on the phone with my steward, we get the news, Hoffa has said, nope. We have this loophole in the contract. The membership vote doesn't matter. This contract is hereby ratified.
That's so crazy.
When he did that, it was crazy.
I mean, he suffered the consequences, and I give the rank and file union members, the workers, a lot of credit for actually taking action against him for forcing that contract on you all. But I understand that I'm asking you to speculate a little bit here, or maybe you know something that I'm not privy to. What motivated Hoffa's decision to force these contracts on the rank and file workers?
I think that there's a little bit of speculation. I wish I knew Hoffa Jr.'s mind a little bit better, but I think that Hoffa and people like him are folks that genuinely believe that the role of the union is to work well with the companies and to work well with management and to work well with the owners, because they believe that it's their job to keep the doors open, to keep jobs coming in, because they want to keep that membership dues money rolling in so that way they can enjoy their nice paychecks that they have. And he was pretty upfront about that.
Wow.
Hoffa would go out and say, I believe we need to collaborate more with the employers, with the major employers that keep this union afloat. And the membership, the people who worked for those employers, who were harassed every day by those employers, who had their wages stolen by those employers, who were threatened with discipline, with discharge, who were forced to go out and work 14 hours a day in all types of conditions. Those same members who didn't miss a single day of work during the COVID pandemic, right? We were forced to go out there and work. And one of Hoffa's last parting gifts during his time was when the pandemic broke out. Instead of fighting for hazard pay for UPS Teamsters, he just agreed to a 10-day paid leave that you could take one time if you got COVID once.
Wow.
Can't tell you how many of my coworkers have gotten COVID more times than that, and yet they have to sit at home without pay because Hoffa agreed to that. And not a single Teamster at UPS got a single penny of hazard pay for the entire duration of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow.
Not a single penny.
That is.
We didn't miss a day of work.
Wow.
And we had to keep working through that, and we didn't get any of that extra bonus, any of that extra money that UPS was raking in off of our backs, because we were the ones that went out there to be the essential heroes that everybody needed, right? And we took pride in that, but we didn't get the benefits of that. The owners of UPS got the benefits of that.
Yeah.
And that's why in this contract campaign, we're here to take something back from them.
I love it, I love it. And I love the new leadership and the militancy in the strategy to fight for better pay, better working conditions. Something that's been striking to me is the comparisons that I've noticed with non-unionized Amazon drivers. We've done a lot of coverage about the terrible abusive conditions that they have to work under, but many of the UPS drivers themselves operate under similar conditions. You do not have vehicles that are air conditioned. You have workloads that are overwhelming, to say the least. And so let's talk a little bit about what the union is fighting for in these negotiations. I want to know exactly what you guys want to change, what you want to secure in this new contract, and also talk a little bit about where you are. I mean, the CEO of UPS claims that you guys aren't that far apart. I don't believe her. I'm curious where you guys are at with the negotiations as well.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of our demands, we're not asking for anything, any moderate demands here. We have high expectations, and we expect those expectations to be met. We're looking for the two-tier driver pay system to be fully eradicated day one of this new contract. We're looking for a significant raise for part-time Teamsters. Part-timers make up over half of our membership. Most of the people who work in the warehouses, unloading trailers and loading package cars are part-time. In cities all over this country, they're at the minimum wage level. The contractual rate right now is $15.50. That's unacceptable. These are the people that keep this company moving. They deserve a significant pay raise. I don't think we're going to accept much short of $25 in this contract for part-timers. We're looking for an end to subcontracting. We're looking for an end to gig workers doing UPS work, because UPS wants Uber and Lyft drivers to go deliver UPS packages instead of Teamsters that have a full-time job. We're looking for AC in all of our vehicles and in all of our warehouses. We have a whole laundry list of issues, and we expect them to be taken seriously by this company. Now, UPS is saying that that they're working well with us, that they're not far apart, and that's not true at all. That's not true at all. The reason why we have a strike authorization vote right now is because UPS is not taking our demands seriously. Our contract negotiating committee is ready to meet 24/7 around the clock. Our national negotiating committee, our local 705 negotiating committee, all of the negotiating committees are ready to meet, and we're very clear. We are not looking for a contract extension. This contract expires July 31st. August 1st, we either have a new contract that the membership has voted in favor of, a membership that has very high expectations and is very clear with what they want, or we're walking a picket line. It's that simple. UPS continues to stall. They continue to drag out negotiations. They continue to not meet with our negotiators or to answer the demands of the membership. And so we're calling a strike authorization vote. They have to take this seriously. And I believe when they see the results of the strike authorization vote, they're going to know that either they sign off on this contract that the membership wants and we get to vote it up in favor, or they're going to have to figure out what's going to happen with all those packages come August 1st. Because I tell you what, FedEx won't deliver them, Amazon won't deliver them, the post office won't deliver them, and they're going to have to answer to those customers and those companies about why their packages aren't moving anymore.
I love it. Final question for you, because I am curious if what the country experienced with the impending rail workers strike concerns you at all. Now, there are federal laws that allow for Congress to step in and squash rail workers attempting to strike. And unfortunately, the Biden administration Congress acted, and they did exactly that. There aren't similar laws when it comes to UPS, but I wouldn't put it past federal lawmakers to intervene, because we're not talking about a small deal. We're talking about, over 350,000 workers striking. And this would impact virtually every single company and business in the country, because you guys are the ones who are moving their products, right? So I'm curious if there has been any talk about what to do should the government try to intervene in some way.
Well, we have talked about it a little bit, as it's something that comes up all the time with my coworkers in our union. We were all very disappointed with what Biden and the federal government did, forcing those rail workers back to work. Like you said, the laws are different. Obviously, the Railway Labor Act covers them. We are not covered by the Railway Labor Act. We're covered by the NLRA, and so we have the right to strike. I believe that we expect things to happen very similarly if a strike happens to what happened in 1997, where Clinton was asked to step in and to try to intervene, try to hold negotiations, try to pull things together, try to call off the strike, pass something through Congress. Clinton happened to not listen to that, and that's what helped us to win our strike in 1997. If we have to strike in August, on August 1st, if UPS forces us to strike, I hope that Biden and Congress do the same and stand with us. I think that, like you said, this isn't a small company. We make this country move. UPS is an incredibly significant company, and I think that when our government talks about trying to do right by working people, trying to do right by the people, the quote unquote essential workers and the heroes that got people through the COVID-19 pandemic. For most people in this country, the face of that is a UPS driver. UPS drivers who are wearing masks, going and delivering the vaccines to hospitals, delivering their essential goods to them, keeping them happy, keeping people healthy, keeping people safe, right? I think that there will be a reckoning if the government tries to intervene in our contract fight, not simply because us 350,000 Teamsters are not going to take this lying down. We're here to win, we're here to take. This is not a question of trade-offs. It's not a question of a half deal. We're looking for a full deal from UPS. And I think that everybody in this country, the public, are going to stand behind us in getting that to happen.
Sean, inspiring words, solidarity with the Teamsters, all the power to you. And I hope that you will come back on the show and give us updates on everything that's happening, the negotiations, where you guys stand on everything. Seriously, we're all rooting for you, and I hope you guys get what you deserve. You guys really do an incredibly important job. So thank you again.
Thanks, sister, appreciate it, and solidarity.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're gonna take a brief break. When we come back, more news for you, including yet another story involving private insurance companies, their executives, and their unbelievable greed. What's up, everyone? I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Lots of great comments. Thank you to everyone who is gifting memberships and subs. You guys are so incredible. We've got Tokyo Thrash and Wendy Davis as new TYT members. Also, special thanks to Exoteric, who gifted 2 memberships, Box, who gifted 5 memberships, and Vicky Gray, who also gifted 5 memberships. So much appreciation for you all. Thank you so much for the support. Olivia writes in and says, they did warrantless wiretapping under the Patriot Act. I gave up a long time ago. They did do warrantless wiretapping, and then the program was further expanded. It was by Congress, by the way. It's just, we learned no lessons, even though, yes, it was 20 years ago, which I very depressingly found out today. Like, I didn't think about how long ago it was, but still, it doesn't matter. It was still recent American history. It was awful, and we should have learned lessons from that. Maeve writes in and says, they want contractors, not employees, no holidays, sick pay, or overtime. That's absolutely correct. That's why they're taking a page out of the gig economy playbook and essentially employing, as you heard in the interview, individuals who will use their personal vehicles to deliver packages. And of course, I mean, the gig economy is disastrous for so many different reasons, including transferring the costs that the companies typically take on, like providing the vehicles, onto the actual worker. So I love the fact that they're fighting back against this, and I really do hope that they win. We've got Jeff Beltari, who says, Sean Orr is a winner, he's got my support. Absolutely, I love his strength. Dieter72 says, I work for the post office, and yes, the COVID package delivery was insane, and it's still crazy. Yep. All right, let's go to our super chat section where we have Stinky Feet write in and say, just what I needed. Marjorie Taylor, oh, this is from yesterday, I think. Okay, here we go. Jason Ray says, they have to squeeze as much profit out of their workers before they switch to driverless delivery and warehouses. By the way, someone wanted to know about the pay for UPS workers. So look, there's one tier of UPS delivery drivers who actually do make a decent salary, but those jobs are starting to get weeded out. So they make around $95,000 a year. That is obviously a livable salary in most parts of the country. But those jobs are dwindling because they created this 2-tiered system, right? So the newer employees are getting paid far less. And that doesn't even take into account what the warehouse workers are making. The people working out of the distribution centers, they're making $15.50 and they're not given full-time jobs. So obviously most people can't live off that, especially, I mean, it depends on where you live in the country, but that's not a livable wage anymore when you take inflation into account. Anyway, we gotta get back to the show. I'll see you all there. TYT, I'm Anna Kasparian, and let's get into a discussion on what corporate greed looks like, especially when it comes to executives in the healthcare industry. Ordinary Americans are still struggling to make ends meet, and the problem has been further exacerbated by corporations using the inflation narrative to price gouge consumers, even when their costs haven't been rising. Now, greedflation seems to be paying off for shareholders and corporate executives because the top 1% are sitting pretty. But look no further than the CEOs of the 7 largest publicly traded insurance companies who made a combined $335 million just last year. So let's do that. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at their CEOs, their companies, and how much money they made. So Joseph Zubretsky, who's the CEO of Molina, he made a whopping $180 million, followed by David Cordani, who's the head of Cigna, and raked in $37.1 million in a single year. Now, Karen Lynch, CEO of CVS Aetna, made $30.9 million. Bruce Broussard, who's the CEO of Humana, was paid handsomely as well at $30.6 million. In fact, if you look at this list, the lowest paid insurance CEO is poor Sarah London, CEO of Centene, who only made a measly $8.2 million. Now, how'd these fat cats make it so big? For starters, they spent billions of dollars on stock buybacks. The executives receive a massive portion of their compensation package through stocks. And if they can game the system and inflate the value of shares, they get paid a lot more. That explains why this practice has been so widespread over the years. In fact, it should be banned, but of course it's not. Now, 7 of the top health insurers spent a whopping, get a load of this, $141 billion on stock buybacks between 2007 and 2022. And to make matters worse, some of those companies get a huge portion of their money from us, the taxpayers. The 3 smallest of the 7 big for-profit insurers, Centene, Humana, and Molina, now get 80 to 90% or more of their revenue from taxpayers through the Medicare Advantage plans they operate and the state Medicaid programs they manage. Look, as we've shared with you all before, Medicare Advantage is privately run but publicly funded. A trait of privately run Medicare Advantage is basically overbilling the Medicare system and ripping off US taxpayers. Awesome. Meanwhile, according to a report from last year, over 100 million Americans, or a whopping 41% of adults in the country, have medical debt. In 2019 alone, before the pandemic, Americans owed a staggering $195 billion in medical bills. The very concept of medical debt is completely foreign to every other developed country, but our country is the exception because corruption is legal here. It's baked into our system. Health industry spending on federal lobbying rose 70% from 2000 to 2020. The industry as a whole spent $713.6 million lobbying federal policymakers in 2020 alone, compared to $358.2 million in 2000, which by the way was still way too high. Now, health industries include drug and device makers, providers like hospitals and physicians, insurers, and other payers and healthcare consultants. And these corporations, these corporations are directly opposing the will of the American people who, by the way, obviously support universal healthcare. That's something that we've also talked about repeatedly on this show because there have been many polls that have repeated the same results. For instance, a 2022 AP poll reveals that public satisfaction with the US healthcare system is remarkably low, with fewer than half of Americans saying it is generally handled well. Only 12% say it is handled extremely or very well. I mean, obviously it's not handled well. We spend more on healthcare than any other developed country with the worst results. About 2/3 of adults think it is the federal government's responsibility to make sure all Americans have healthcare coverage, with adults ages 18 to 49 more likely than those over 50 to hold that view. The percentage of people who believe healthcare coverage is a government responsibility has risen in recent years, ticking up from 57% in 2019 and 62% in 2017. There are so many business practices that the federal government has greenlit. Corporate stock buybacks is a perfect example. But in the very least, could the federal government maybe reconsider greenlighting private insurers using our taxpayer money through the Medicare system to essentially enrich themselves further through corporate stock buybacks? I mean, I really appreciate just that one small change. As if the price gouging we experience in the healthcare industry, as if the denials of coverage that we experience every time a procedure is not authorized by the insurance company that we're covered by, as if all of that isn't enough. All of those behaviors meant to maximize profits, not enough for them. They also have to rip off the Medicare system to essentially enrich themselves further. And while Republicans love to complain about how Medicare, it's just too costly, it might not be solvent in a few years, maybe they should consider the fact that private industry is overcharging the Medicare system through Medicare Advantage. Even Trump wanted to do something about that. Now, it didn't end up coming to fruition because of course, even when it comes to the right wing, when their corporate donors speak, they certainly listen. But the idea that American taxpayer money is being used on corporate stock buybacks by private healthcare executives, the fact that that's happening right now as we speak, and it's just unabated, unmitigated, no talk about it whatsoever from the federal government, including progressive lawmakers, that's infuriating. Something needs to be done about that. But of course, let's get distracted by all the cultural things that set us apart from each other. Let's fight each other. Let's do that. It's great. Ordinary Americans, ordinary workers at each other's throats over their cultural differences. That's the perfect thing for us to focus on as we're all getting robbed. Love it. Just something to think about as you hear the reports in corporate media, as you see what the issues are according to our congressional lawmakers, what we should be focusing on. Ask yourselves, are they trying to pit you against your fellow American so you're not concerned or not paying attention to the robbery that's taking place? Because I think that's what's really going on here, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Anyway, let's move on to one of the headline stories today. I gotta fit in one headline story in the first hour on Wednesday. So let's talk about Chris Licht.
CNN's chairman and CEO, Chris Licht, is leaving the network. Licht took over the network a little over a year ago. David Zaslav, the chairman of CNN's parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, he just made the announcement at the network editorial meeting. For now, a leadership team will take Licht's place.
Chris Licht's time as the CEO of CNN was a short one, as the cable network announced this morning that he's stepping down. Now, the decision was made following backlash from hosts and staffers at the network, the firing of Don Lemon and the lengthy profile in The Atlantic shedding light on some of Licht's terrible decisions. All of that kind of played a role here. Now, those decisions included hosting a town hall with Donald Trump as an olive branch to Republican voters, which ended up being perceived as anything but by the right because it was moderated by Caitlin Collins, who didn't have a really great history with Donald Trump. Now, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, David Zaslav, confirmed the news during the network's morning call, saying, quote, "I met with Chris and he will be leaving CNN." Zaslav apparently took responsibility for Licht's failure, telling the 800 staffers who joined that morning call that for a number of reasons it didn't work out, and that's on me. Now, Zaslav also noted that he feels no rush to find a new CEO. And for now, Licht will be succeeded by a team of 3 people who are already executives at the network. And that includes Amy Entelis, who is the executive vice president for talent and content over at CNN. We also have Virginia Mosley, the executive vice president of editorial at CNN US, and Eric Sherling, executive vice president of US programming. I know nothing about any one of them, but they've been at CNN, and it doesn't seem like much is likely to change with this new move of having a 3-person leadership team take charge. But nonetheless, back to Licht, who we covered earlier this week after The Atlantic published a stunning profile on him. After the piece was published, Licht told CNN staffers on Monday of this week that he vowed to earn their trust back, but apparently it was too late. CNN's own media reporter, Oliver Darcy, had reported that many people within the organization shared the consensus that Licht had lost the room. Even top talent, including Jake Tapper, Anderson Cooper, and Aaron Burnett reportedly expressed concerns about Licht's leadership, according to the Wall Street Journal. But that's not surprising considering the way Licht would basically treat people within the network. For instance, that Atlantic piece profiling him detailed the way he would talk about Don Lemon. In fact, during a rehearsal for the new morning show that Don Lemon was supposed to host with Poppy Harlow and Caitlin Collins, Licht freaked out over what Lemon was wearing. And remember, this was during a rehearsal. He wasn't even on air. Let me read from the piece. Lemon had changed into a white jacket, the collar made of fur, with a turtleneck underneath. "What the F is he wearing?" Licht blurted out. A little while later, the younger producer spoke into Lemon's earpiece. "Don, we're not too crazy about the jacket in here. Lemon looked miffed, Licht fought back a smirk, saying, "Why are you guys so mean to Don?" Yeah, it's just, look, we have some inside sources that indicate that he did not have fur on the collar of that jacket, but nonetheless, neither here nor there. But weird cattiness aside, Licht seemed to want to balance out the network's coverage, which had become ideologically slanted against Trump. He felt that CNN had been alienating half the country with its anti-Trump coverage. But he never had a strategy or a well thought out vision for how reporters would accurately cover stories about wrongdoing by the right without alienating their base. Even more concerning, and this is a larger issue with most corporate and legacy media, is that there is never any discussion shifting away from the culture wars for just a few minutes to focus on, corporate greed or economic inequalities in America. CNN became synonymous with financially comfortable resistance liberals who were expectedly outraged over the cable news channel pivoting toward friendlier Trump coverage. Not only did Licht fail in attracting a Republican audience, he turned off their moderate liberal audience too, and it was reflected in the ratings. During Licht's leadership, the network saw poor ratings and lower profits. Last year, the network brought in $750 million in profits, which was down from $1.25 billion in 2021, according to the New York Times. Now, sit back and imagine if the news decided to cover stories that just naturally, organically speak to the majority of Americans. While on the surface, American voters appear to be super divided, and they are divided when it comes to cultural issues. Those divisions tend to center on the culture war. But when it comes to actual policy preferences that impact people's pocketbooks, there's a lot of similarities, okay? Whether it's money in politics, corporate greed, low taxes for the rich, the majority of Americans agree and they want to do something about it. I would venture to say they would want to see some coverage on those issues. But those are the very issues that CNN and the rest of the corporate media stay away from for obvious reasons. If the thinking over at CNN is as shallow as should we be nice to Trump or not, the network's doomed. In order to draw a broad audience, you have to address issues that have broad appeal. CNN should try that out, but I doubt that they will. All right, we gotta take a break. When I come back, I'll be joined by our very own John Idarola. Really looking forward to it. He was napping on the couch in the office. We must wake him up and force him into the studio. And we will do just that and see you in just a few minutes.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. They'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
fucks up black and brown folks. We not going for the okie doke no more.
I think Nina Turner is the leader of the progressive movement right now.
It is absolutely a sin and a shame to be in the 21st century in America and having people who are elected to office not only try to separate us, but also use public policy to make it harder to vote.
The questions that we get asked is what you just, how you gonna pay for it? I say, oh, we gonna pay for it the same way we pay for the tax cuts. That's how we gonna pay for it. We gonna pay for it in the same way that we give military industrial complex contractors. That's how we gonna pay for it.
If standing up for universal health care or Medicare for all is wrong, Jink, I don't want to be right. If believing that working people deserve to have paid family and medical leave is wrong, I don't want to be right. If wanting everyday people of this nation to live a good life is wrong, then I don't want to be right.
And we are being tested whether we have courage enough, conviction enough, people power enough to stand up and do what is right for ourselves and generations yet unborn.
I'm Nina Turner, and I am unbought and unbossed.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. I was losing my mind during the break talking about the idea of people thinking it's okay for the government to place surveillance cameras in our homes. That's crazy.
I think the only people that should be placing cameras in our homes are friends and family.
You have to take this seriously.
It's bad. I don't like it. They have no right.
Yes.
Patriot Act.
Yes. Okay, all right. Well, look,
I do actually not like it. I just
no, it's disastrous. Like I can't believe this is where we're at.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why people would be okay with that. I don't know.
Someone wrote in. I've lost the comment.
Maybe they've explained why.
So someone wrote in and said wanted a compromise. Like this person is definitely in the percentage of people who are okay with the government spying in on us in our own homes. And says like maybe we can have a compromise by placing like government Nest cameras like outside, like just outside the home. Why do you want the government spying on you indiscriminately? That's crazy. That's insane.
Do we get something for that? Like, because compromise usually implies that you're getting something.
No, but like the Cato survey that I covered specifically asked, would you be okay? Would you approve of the government installing surveillance cameras in your home if they could, fight domestic violence, abuse, or other crimes? And they said yes.
That's an interesting hypothetical. I just don't know why we would assume that that's what the outcome would be.
I would never assume that that's what the outcome could be. There's crime happening on camera like every day that needs to be dealt with outside in public spaces. Like if you're concerned about crime, deal with that. Don't put cameras in people's homes. Anyway, let's move on. Like I moved on. But I'm still like shocked that people are in favor of that.
We should do a poll. Did we?
I'm afraid to do a poll. I don't want to get depressed. Anyway.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to a born again Christian. This is a common occurrence and I definitely want to discuss it, so let's do it.
We're not doing it tonight, bro. It's not gonna leave you feeling satisfied. I've jerked off and I've gone back to that crap. And it makes me feel like garbage. It makes me empty. The devil's trying to hinder us with sexual immorality. The devil's not gonna win. The devil hates me. He hates you. He doesn't like these videos. He doesn't like you. He wants you to give into sexual immorality. Do not do it. Women get turned on, but men think about war.
So Hassan Piker's evil doppelganger there, his name is Ryan Foley, happens to be a Christian influencer, and he loves to post TikToks about his Christian identity, no problem with that. It becomes a problem when he blames all his issues on the transgender community. In fact, he admits that he used to watch all sorts of weird porn and even harass underage girls, but he says he's a changed man now. Let's watch.
When I was 18 years old, I had a Snapchat that I Snapchatted younger girls on because I got off to flirting with younger girls in a sexual way. Shortly after that, I began watching and going on a Grindr to hook up with transgenders because I got off to these things. I hired prostitutes that were transgenders. I had sex with many women. I used to watch murder porn, and when I was having sex with my wife, who I falsely married ourselves to justify sex, because I had watched pornography of strangulation and murder, I used to, in my mind, close my eyes and think about killing her while I was having sex with her and get off to these things. I tell you these things because time is running out, and I don't care if I'm perceived as a pedophile, homosexual, murderer. If it helps you understand that anyone can come to God.
Oh my God.
It did help me understand. No.
Wow, that was a lot. Now, it turns out that while he claims to be a changed man in the strangest way possible, by the way, like that was a very fascinating delivery, to say the least.
It was a lot.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so
that was so stunning that I'm speechless at the moment. But maybe you have something to say.
It's a strategy called flooding the zone. The idea being that if you would normally be bothered by the fact that he's talking to underage girls online,
yeah,
but you don't have time to worry about that because he's on to the next thing. I guess that would be the hiring the prostitutes, which I don't have a problem with, but do you? But then if you have a problem with that, then you have the next thing, then the false pretenses with the wife, then the thinking about the murdering the wife. And it's like, I don't even remember what the first weird thing was.
I'm concerned.
I will say this though, like all of this is whatever it is. I don't follow a lot of like super uber religious TikTokers or any TikTokers.
Oh, you don't? That's shocking.
No, so I don't know if this fits into the genre, but when someone who is talking about, talking to underage girls, not caring if you think that they're a pedophile, they're fantasizing about murder, then says, I don't care, time is running out. That's like an alarm going off. That's the way that you talk before you do something or you're worried you'll do something. Most normal people don't talk about time running out in this way. Maybe about the climate or something, but that's a longer time zone.
Again, I'm speechless regarding what we just watched was so shocking. I hadn't seen that until I watched it live on camera. So wow. Okay. Anyway. But while he says he's a changed man, except he doesn't really say he's a changed man. Does he? I mean, that video.
I think he said he used to do that. He's implying that he doesn't do it anymore.
Well, he does some of it still,
yeah.
Right. And by the way, look, if you're a normal person who doesn't make a career out of trashing various groups of people, in this case, transgender people, and you do what we're about to reveal he's been doing, no problem whatsoever. However, the fact that he blames all of his issues on the trans community, right? For instance, he says he struggled, he had all these troubles because of how hot he found transgender people. Okay, that's by the way, being attracted to transgender people is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But because of whatever religious indoctrination he's bought into, he hates himself for it, right? So he comes out as this religious influencer who, says, I'm a changed man, and he trashes these communities. But then it turns out he gets caught, right? So apparently he was outed by an OnlyFans creator as being one of their paying customers. Let's watch.
For years upon years, I was watching transgender porn. femboy porn, all that.
Yes, you were, Ryan, and thank you. Thank you for the $10 whole that you gave me.
Look, I'm not surprised. Like this comes up ever so often. Some of the most loud, animated, anti-LGBTQ people end up either being gay themselves or transgender themselves, or in this case, attracted to femboys. Again, nothing wrong with that at all. But there is something wrong with that when the self-hatred leads one to say the hideous, terrible things that this guy Foley's been saying, Ryan Foley's been saying through his TikTok videos and all of that.
Yeah, and look, religion isn't the only way that you could be trained to believe that these perfectly normal things about yourself are not normal, but it's a pretty popular way to effectively pre-wreck a person so that they can experience a life like this. I don't like, I like, that he's saying, I don't do this anymore, and they bring the receipts, the OnlyFans creator. I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable with that being added. That seems like a part of the financial transaction, seems like it's a privacy thing. That seems a little bit weird to me.
Sure,
I understand it. If he's attacking, you're gonna wanna lash back. I get that.
Look, I disagree with you. If you make a name for yourself by spreading poison, if you're actually engaging in the behavior that you're condemning, which leads to, in some cases, violence against these communities and all that, no, you should be called out. I think you should, right? I think there's a difference.
You don't disagree with me because I'm not saying that I'm against that. It struck me. So anyway, look, liking that pornography or being attracted to transgender people is not a problem. I would love it if you would stop calling people transgenders. After years of watching this, you don't get the terminology. But yeah, on the fantasizing about murdering your wife or murdering anyone, that's a more serious thing. That's a thing where maybe more religion or more TikTok isn't the solution. Maybe therapy, among other things.
Seriously. Yes. Yes.
And this isn't just about him or just about evangelicals or whatever. If you're fantasizing about murder, it's a great thing if you were to get some professional help.
No,
to deal
100%.
With that.
Look, okay, so in all honesty, there's a side of me, I don't know if it's the bleeding heart side of me, I don't know what it is, right? That feels so sad for him.
I feel bad for him.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so,
I mean, I don't know a lot about it. Maybe I shouldn't.
He's a tortured soul and he hates himself, right? But at the same time, his actions have consequences for other people, the very people he targets through his Christian influencer stuff that he puts out there on TikTok. And I just want him to get the help he needs. I agree with you. He needs to talk to someone. He needs counseling. He needs to, understand that whatever attraction he has is not a bad thing. It doesn't make him a terrible person. He is not going to burn in hell for eternity just because he's attracted to transgender individuals. But at the same time, he needs to understand what he's doing to other people by putting this out there. That his self-hatred is manifesting in poisonous, toxic ways. That's all.
Yeah, that if any of the religious stuff he believes turns out to be true, probably isn't cool with the divine leaders of that faith, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and finally, I've never heard of this person before, so I don't know the things that they've said in the past. I don't know how big their following is. I don't want to know because it would just anger me, because I'm imagining it's in the millions or whatever. But I would also say, like, I get that he's got a camera really close to his face and he's screaming. I understand that is appealing to people online. But like, if you want like a religious influencer, I guarantee there's people who are just like volunteering at soup kitchens and helping out and being good. You could listen to them. Like, get you an influencer who hasn't had to overcome the deep-seated desire to murder their intimate partner. I'm not saying that like apologizing for that and growing past that isn't a good thing, but there are also people who never did that. You could watch their videos.
I think one of the things that's missing in society today that was far more common decades ago, people would get together. Like local governments would have, I don't know, certain clubs or certain, do you get what I'm saying? I can't think of anything specific at the moment, but.
I don't know what I mean yet.
various groups of people, like they would get together socially in the community and they'd get to know each other.
Like a picnic or something?
Not a picnic, it was more like, I don't know.
Elks Club?
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know.
Rotary?
Exactly. Okay. Yes, Rotary, Elks Club. Okay, all that old timey stuff I'm bringing up not because I want that specific type or branded group to come back. I don't care about that. What I do care about is getting people together in person to get to know each other through whatever shared interests, okay? I don't know what it is, I don't care what it is, but a way to get people off of their computers, off of their phones, and in rooms with other individuals in real life. Like, I just think that we're so disconnected because of our over-reliance on technology. And I think that's part of the problem.
I'm so glad that you said that because I was thinking that earlier, like when he's like talking about I used to watch like so much of this porn, and like he's not alone in having an issue with the porn that he consumes or how much he consumes, and I think a lot of that is needless, but maybe some of it makes sense or whatever. This is a complex problem and everything, and like that's now been replaced by like screaming into TikTok or whatever. And I get it, I scream into a lot of cameras, glass houses and all that, but like go to a baseball game and sit in the stands and eat a hot dog or a veggie dog or something. Just like be outside with no devices and connect to a person. Go to the library.
It feels
start
so
a board
good.
game group.
It feels so good. Yes.
Yeah, meet actual people. And this is not advice to him. He's not listening anyway. But like all the people who have these like huge problems with their pornography and I'm never gonna be able to find a person and blah. Just like go and do things and be a person. Don't just be like an emotional ball of frustrations. Like develop interests and knowledge and listen to people and. Like that's what life actually is, and the internet can supplement that to some extent, but you have to have life too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think building relationships with people, going out there and doing things with your community, right? Like one of the things that I like doing is meeting up with people in my neighborhood to like pick up trash in the community, right? Like I got to know people, I got to know some of my neighbors who I otherwise would never make any effort to talk to.
I never knew you did that.
Yeah, but since we share that one interest in like trying to pick up trash, we don't like litter, we don't want it going into the oceans, like we get together, we pick up some trash, it's great. Like get to know people in your community. You might be different, right? You might even have a completely different cultural background, you might fall on different areas and culture war spectrums, doesn't matter, right? Get to know each other as human beings. Don't front load political discussions. Please don't do that, that's a bad idea. But get to know people for who they are outside of their political leanings. Yeah.
I agree.
Anyway, all right, let's move on to, I don't think we're gonna take too long with this story. It makes me uncomfortable, but nonetheless, let's talk about Chris Christie.
And it was about our country and its future. And I wondered what our choice was gonna be. Were we gonna be small or were we gonna be big?
You just watched a video that was posted by Donald Trump. It's a video of Chris Christie. Obviously, it is edited to make it look like he's in a Chinese buffet and or an all-you-can-eat buffet. I think there was some Chinese food in there. But nonetheless, Trump posted it because it's apparently totally okay and widespread to make fun of Chris Christie's weight. Honestly, I've seen it everywhere. I haven't just seen it with right-wingers, I've seen it with all sorts of people on social media, regardless of what their political leanings might be. But Trump didn't stop there. Before we get to more of his gross attacks on Chris Christie, let's talk about Christie himself. So the former governor of New Jersey has decided to launch his 2024 presidential announcement. He did so last night with some of the harshest critics going after him, including Donald Trump. And he went after Trump himself. He also went after Trump's family members, which is different from what we've experienced from other GOP presidential candidates. So let's take a look at the next video where you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about.
A lonely, self-consumed, self-serving mirror hog. The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump. The grift from this family is breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Kushner walk out of the White House and months later get $2 billion from the Saudis? $2 billion from the Saudis. You think it's because he's some kind of investing genius? Or do you think it's because he was sitting next to the president of the United States for 4 years doing favors for the Saudis?
I mean, he did do favors for the Saudis. He certainly did that. I mean, everything that Chris Christie said there was true. He was not afraid to call Trump out by name, whereas every other GOP candidate seems to beat around the bush or just avoid attacking Trump altogether. But I do want to just remind you all that Chris Christie endorsed Trump in 2016 and in 2020 as well. So John, what say you?
I was hoping that you wouldn't end with also 2020. Yeah, that's not great.
No, it's awful. I mean, imagine experiencing the Trump administration for 4 years straight and then deciding to endorse him anyway. And now the whole brand that Chris Christie's going for is, I'm the tough guy because I'll call Trump out.
He's been criticizing him for a couple years. I mean, you could in theory, I guess, have endorsed him, but then seen what happened after the election and been appalled by it. I don't really think so, but yeah, there is, look, I will say, I don't think that he has basically any chance whatsoever of winning this. But maybe that's just because I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up around a lot of Italians. I watched Sopranos growing up. But when he speaks, he does seem more like an actual person than the vast majority of politicians, I think, when he was speaking there. I mean, those are prepared remarks and everything. He's said them in a mirror himself before, I'm sure. But he seems less, he's not a Ted Cruz, he's not a Marco Rubio. He seems like a person who's actually thinking and cares about some of this stuff. It doesn't seem all to have been constructed. He's, I'm sure, terrible in a lot of ways, particularly politically when it comes to economics.
Yeah,
I'm sure so much better than like a Trump or something.
I mean, I'm sure no one coached Chris Christie on like trying to appear like a normal person by putting his hand in his pocket as he's talking to the public. I mean, yes, right?
Okay.
Like, because that's how normal people talk, right? They like to put their hand in their pocket and be like, you know,
he seems more like a real person.
I am a normal person.
And cousin Greg's in the background. But let me just also say, on the jokes, they've been brutal. I mean, like, I know we don't care, it's the most expected thing in the world, but like the former president of the United States.
Who's also overweight, by the way.
Who's also incredibly overweight.
Yeah.
Like, just, that's not an opinion, that's not mockery, it's just simply a fact.
Yeah.
You know, I've had my own struggles, I understand, I'm not throwing stones or whatever,
I'm
but
doing
like
all right.
you clearly are.
Just kidding.
But now I feel worse. So anyway,
you're not struggling. You're Swolderola. Everyone knows it.
Anyway, we're not gonna make this about me any more than I already have. His son brutally attacking him, Roger Stone. Now, these are all obviously super hotties, so I understand why they'd throw stones around physical appearance. Everybody wants to be them or be with them, but it's weird too because, like, I'm sure there are tons of Trump fans wearing MAGA hats and grab them by the PT shirts who are like laughing uproariously at these jokes that are themselves very overweight. What percentage of like the average 50-year-old Trump fan is obese?
No,
in America,
guys,
70%. This is just America.
The majority of Americans are either overweight or obese. Like it is a problem in the country. Like it has been an ongoing problem in the country. I'm not saying that to insult anyone. It is incredibly difficult to stay in shape in this country for a variety of reasons, okay? It's not just because people are irresponsible with their diet. I mean, we have massive issues with healthcare in America, massive issues with the affordability of good quality food.
Or education around food and
education around food, exactly. So like, I'm not saying that to be terrible or insulting toward most Americans. I'm saying that because that is the reality that we're dealing with. And so what I am actually very curious about is for all of these goons who are making fun of Chris Christie specifically, like Chris Christie is a target-rich environment on like his run as governor of New Jersey. There's so many different things that you could like take jabs on him on. Instead, they're just going with, he's overweight. Well, the majority of Americans happen to be overweight. So how are they gonna feel about you just targeting Chris Christie on that alone?
Yeah, most of them probably perfectly fine. I think the vast majority, particularly of conservative Americans, have been trained that it is totally acceptable and it does not bother them. It's woke to care about that. Fat phobia is a ridiculous lib commie San Francisco. I'm being serious. Like, and by the way, also on the jokes, like I talked about this on the Damage Report this morning. Like, it is super normalized in America to mock people for their weight. It's like the most common thing in the world. And as I said, it's not like if you go back enough years, I haven't made jokes or whatever. I don't think they were ever particularly vicious or particularly common, but I did.
I, for one, have never, ever
you might not have, I don't know.
someone out on their weight, not even once. There has never been a viral video of me pointing at a prominent public figure and calling him
I get what you're
fat
saying.
F.
But let me just quickly say,
I have.
One of the reasons that I think so many people think that it's okay is part of the training and the normalization is, I'm not mocking a person because they're fat. I'm mocking a bad person by pointing out that they're fat. But what I'm attacking is that they're bad, but that's not actually how it works. You are mocking the fact that someone's overweight, and there are plenty of people that you like that agree with you that are not bad people, but are also overweight. You are mocking them when you mock the bad person. You are not suddenly freed up to mock people for their body composition, their race, their ethnicity, their sexuality, just because this example's a bad person. That's not actually how it works.
I mean, look, I have no leg to stand on this because I called Alex Jones fat a fat F as he invaded our live broadcast during the Republican National Convention in 2016. I have never apologized for that. I will never apologize for that because he is a terrible person. And I get what you're saying. In the heat of that moment, I wasn't gonna scream out like a well thought out, argument against him.
Right? You're often illogical.
Right, I wasn't like.
You don't think about the things you say.
However, in the context of literal GOP presidential candidates, it's a little different. You have more of an opportunity to kind of like think through what your critique is gonna be. And if your critique is just as simple-minded as, that guy's fat, okay, you got anything else? Now, I do want to talk a little bit about why Christie thinks he could win. He genuinely thinks he could win. He's very low in the polling right now, but who knows? I mean, there's a lifetime between now and the general election. Apparently, he says that he'll do better in 2024 because he can now hit Trump's actual record. He didn't build a wall. We haven't gotten our first peso, meaning Mexico didn't pay for a wall. But Trump has been attacked on that before. I don't know if it's gonna work with Chris Christie doing it. I think the only thing that might work is if you find Trump's Achilles heel and mock him for it and throw him off his game. But I don't know if Chris Christie has that in mind. I do wanna read a quick excerpt from CNN breaking news editor David Mark, who thinks that, you know what, Chris Christie's got a good shot. Got a good shot. He writes, Christie is casting himself as the one moderate GOP primary candidate willing to confront Trump head on, along with a relatively bipartisan record as New Jersey's governor from 2010 to 2018. This approach makes Christie the most distinctive non-Trump GOP candidate, one with a narrow but plausible path to victory.
Most of that paragraph is accurate. I don't know about the plausible. Yeah, I think he makes more sense than a lot of the other moderate Republicans who are only sort of technically running, but they're not really gonna try to take down Trump. I think he has about as good a chance as anyone of landing solid blows on Trump, but I don't think that that's a good chance regardless. And I don't know how many, I don't know how many Republicans want an actual moderate, less crazy person who's not gonna just constantly talk about trans pole vaulters or whatever. Like, I don't know what that constituency is. Is it 10% of Republicans? I just don't think that's enough.
I'm just curious to find out how things will develop as this election season heats up. I'm actually surprised at how many Republicans decided to throw their hat in the race, or their hat in the race?
Hat in the ring.
Hat in the ring. I thought that most of them would be terrified to run against Trump, but big ups to them for deciding to do it. But I guess extra credit to Chris Christie for being able to do what every other contender has been shying away from, which is call Trump out by name.
Yep.
And that's it. I don't want to get to more like fat shaming stuff from Trump. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. So let's just move on. Fair. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we have more news for you, including, what are we gonna do next? Let's see. What can I tease you guys all with? Oh.
The plane?
We're spending money, taxpayer money on private religious schools now. which is great. Anyway, that and more coming up. Special thanks to Lady Funkin' T in our super chat section. WRN Ring Surgeon writes in and says, this is the message I was referring to earlier. Can we compromise with government ring cameras like outside of buildings? I guess I'm part of the startling statistic. You know what? I don't believe you. I think you're trolling me. I'm just gonna tell myself that so I can sleep easy tonight.
I get the impulse. I just believe it is based on some faulty estimations of what's likely to come. But I like the idea that we would be safer.
Right.
There's an optimism.
You guys have no idea how much I'm holding back. I'm just gonna
optimism.
Continue holding back. Guys, how many of you got mad at me for simply sharing a video of a guy who had been arrested 42 times and sucker punched an elderly Asian woman on the streets of New York? How many people were furious that I felt that person should be taken off the streets? He was on tape, on tape, on tape.
He could have been on more tapes if there were government
If we're not gonna do anything about these people, literally sucker punching elderly people on the streets of New York City, I'm not interested in even considering your argument about putting cameras in our homes to combat crime. Not interested.
I have a compromise. Government
no
nest
compromises. I'm not even having a conversation about it.
Of rare birds, so that we can watch peregrine falcons.
Okay.
Tending to their young.
Athletes LLC writes in and says, "This is a classic way that folks try to justify their actions." I think this is about the religious TikTok influencer. We all have issues and problems. The point of it is how you affect others with your issues. His videos are affecting others negatively. You are 1000% right. That's exactly what we were saying.
Agreed.
Jason Ray says we need public adult use locals for cannabis. Spark some conversations. I think I'd be a little too paranoid for that, but Cenk would love it. Are you kidding me? He would love that. Frank Rockefeller writes in and says, the government hands out $500 million as a reward for lottery gambling, and this is luck. CEOs do work and demand their value, morality. Frank, how exactly is someone working hard to earn money when they overcharge the Medicare system, okay? Take taxpayer money and simply sit back and invest that money in artificially inflating the shares of their stock? Like, how is that hard work? If that counts as hard work, I mean, what are we doing? Like, well, that's not an argument. It's just not an argument. If the executives are getting compensated based on, not pulling these tricks and not overcharging the Medicare system, then we're having a conversation, but that's not what's happening here. All right, let's go to Stinky Feet. CNN is hopeless. Just watch TYT people. Totally agree with you. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. John, how you doing?
I'm good.
All right, we've got more to get to. This story is concerning, and for two atheists in the network, it should be especially concerning. Let's get to it.
Oklahoma's school board has voted to approve what could become the nation's first publicly funded religious school. The application came from the Catholic Archdiocese of Oklahoma. It aims to create an online public charter school for students across the state from kindergarten through 12th grade. It would be funded by taxpayer dollars. And Oklahoma's Attorney General warns it's unconstitutional and opens the state to potential litigation.
Well, it does certainly open the state to potential litigation because we do live in a society that is, governed by a constitution that separates church and state. The idea of public money pouring into a religious institution, in this case, a religious Catholic school, seems to go against those constitutional protections. But nonetheless, the Supreme Court, considering how conservative it is at the moment, is very unlikely to strike this down. That is my speculation. But before we get to the Supreme Court, why don't we talk a little bit about this school in Oklahoma? So it's called the St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School, and I think its purpose is pretty clear here. The Catholic Archdiocese of Oklahoma and the Diocese of Tulsa wrote in their application to form the school the following. So they wrote that the Catholic school participants in the evangelizing mission of the church and is the privileged environment in which Christian education is carried out. It is a Christian school. It is a religious school, I should say. The school was approved by a 3-2 vote on Monday of this week, thanks to some last-minute political maneuvering, which you're about to learn about. A similar application by the school was rejected unanimously in April. The revised and resubmitted application was approved on Monday after the Oklahoma House Speaker, Charles McCall, a Republican, appointed a new board member to replace a previous one at the last minute on Friday. Oklahoma's Republican Attorney General spoke out against the board's vote, saying that the approval of any publicly funded religious school is contrary to Oklahoma law and not in the best interest of taxpayers. It's extremely disappointing that board members violated their oath in order to fund religious schools with our tax dollars. In doing so, these members have exposed themselves and the state to potential legal action. So I just want to ask the state of Oklahoma, those who are proponents of what's transpiring here, if they would be okay with taxpayer money being funneled to a religious Muslim school. Would they? I would venture to say that they would find that problematic. Or a satanic school. I'd venture to say they would find that problematic. I could be wrong, but what do you think, John?
You can already go to satanic school. It's in Target every day. Kidding. Yeah, so that's I think that's the automatic reaction that I had, that I think most people have. But what I think it misses is that you are assuming that they think this should be equitable. They don't. They think we win, they lose. It's obviously unconstitutional, it's explicitly unconstitutional, it's intentionally unconstitutional. They know, like a lot of these abortion laws that are being passed, that it obviously is unconstitutional. They are wagering that we've already won the Supreme Court. Screw law, screw precedent, screw the Constitution. We can do whatever we want. And all this stuff about, well, then you'll have Muslim schools and you'll have Hindu schools and you'll have Jain schools and you'll have Jewish schools. No, you won't, because they'll be in charge and they will stop that from happening. They will elevate themselves to a position of superiority. The separation of church and state has been subverted in such an amazing way in that the churches don't have to pay taxes, but the tax dollars go to the religious schools.
That's right, yeah.
It's not separate, it's literally above. Because you benefit from the money that you don't have to contribute. All of this, again, like I like pointing out the hypocrisy and the inconsistency, because we as lefties or libs or progressives, whatever you want to say, we believe that hypocrisy is bad and consistency is good, but they don't believe that. They believe that winning is good and losing is bad. They don't care if Christian schools are allowed but Muslim schools aren't, because Christians are good and Muslims are bad according to them.
By the way, let me just be absolutely clear here. I don't want taxpayer money funneled to any religious school. I don't care if it's a Christian school, Jewish school, Muslim school, satanic school, it doesn't matter. I want none of
Jedi Academy, I'd be fine with.
We have a separation of church and state. This sets a devastating precedent, and that's what I'm also curious about, right? Because if this gets litigated all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides, no, we're gonna protect this. We're going to decide that this is totally fine, that funneling taxpayer money to a religious institution, totally fine. Okay, but precedent does matter. So if someone decides to push for the funding of a, school that believes in the Muslim doctrine, right? And that gets litigated to the Supreme Court, what do? Do they uphold it?
They'll say that that's not consistent with the social religious makeup of the area, and it's the province of each government to reflect the religious makeup of its whatever. They'll make up literally whatever they want. Again, they're not actually special or logical. They're like, the Supreme Court is full of drunks and religious radicals. That's all it is. Sexual assaulters and the most corrupt people in the country. They're not special, they're not awesome. They're politicians who didn't have to run for election. That's all they are.
So let's talk a little bit about why John is onto something, because the Supreme Court has been dismantling to some extent, the secular education system in the country. So let's talk a little bit about that. So in a 2017 case, for instance, the court ruled that a church-run preschool in Missouri was entitled to a state grant to resurface its playground. 3 years later, the court ruled that Montana could not bar recipients of the state's private school voucher program from using them at religious schools. And last year, the court said that a Maine voucher program that sent rural students to private high schools in communities that had no public ones had to be open to religious schools. Look, that very last part, I think, is way more complicated. If you're talking about students in rural parts of the country that don't have access to public schools, I can understand the reasoning behind it, right? Like the reasoning of allowing for some funding to go to religious schools in those rural areas. But how about we build more public schools so public money isn't going toward private institutions? But anyway, there's more. So according to public notice, it's not much of a stretch to imagine SCOTUS holding that the First Amendment requires public tax dollars to go to public school because a prohibition on doing so, quote, burdens not only religious schools, but the families whose children attend or hope to attend them. We have long recognized the rights of parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children. But do that in your homes. You don't do that in schools, right? Unless it's a private school that requires privately funded tuition, not public funds.
Obviously. But wouldn't it be nice if the religion of all of the conservatives on that court was the one that got the bucks? What about that legal doctrine? I get your money.
Everything that makes this country great is slowly but surely being dismantled. We hear a lot from the right wing about the need to uphold our freedoms, our liberties. Religious liberty happens to be one of those things. Religious liberty doesn't just mean that Christians get to practice their religion without any interference. Religious liberty means the government shouldn't fund or promote any particular religion or force religion upon us. And the fact that these principles, these elements of our constitutional rights are being eroded thanks to agenda-driven policymakers and federal judges, and in this case, Supreme Court justices, is so incredibly depressing. We need to actually value freedom, and that means freedom from religion and the freedom to practice whatever religion you like, but you don't get public dollars funneled to your organization as a result of that. You just don't. Anyway, we gotta take a break. Super depressing, but when we come back, we'll talk about how one woman in Washington, D.C. was real sick of her neighbor smoking the devil's lettuce. So she sued and she won. The details on that and more coming right up. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Ginger Sasquatch writes in, thank you for being a member for 6 months. And this makes me really sad. I don't think we've talked about this on the show yet, but the message is super chat in remembrance of Lance Reddick. He would have been 61 years old today.
That's sad.
He passed away unexpectedly. Really, really depressing. He was such a great person, super talented actor, friend of the show. He's been on the show before. So yeah, thank you for that reminder. Really, really heartbreaking story. Jason Ray writes in and says, okay, cool. So atheist Oklahoma resident should stop paying state taxes. Time to spill some tea. Seem to remember a revolution being fought over such things. I just, again, like John, you made such a good point about how religious institutions don't pay taxes. And the idea of public money being like funneled to religious private schools or any religious institution is insane to me. Just anyway, it's, yeah. Red Calico Cat Dragon says, you should make a dramatized video of waking John up from his nap. Could use it as a new between clip for the lulz.
I do miss that we don't still make more of those between clips.
How do you fall asleep in the office? Like how do you make that happen?
It takes hours of preparation wherein I gradually grow so exhausted that I could fall asleep on the floor if I had to. I wake up at 5, I'm in the gym like 15 minutes later.
Not same.
Then I start producing, I'm staring at a screen for hours. I have to have some energy to do this show in the late afternoon, so I am wiped in the middle of the day.
Even if I'm tired, like my insomnia is so bad that like I just can't fall. It's the worst. My body's tired, my mind is tired, but I just can't fall asleep. I don't know. Or I'll fall asleep and wake up at 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning and it's over. It's over. I'm up. I can't go back to sleep. It drives me crazy.
I start playing Tears of the Kingdom. I would find something for my time.
Yeah, love Tears of the Kingdom.
But you might.
You already live in America. Like what other, like you have to go to a different virtual.
Tears of the Republic.
Yeah. Otto B writes in and says, oh my God, another Jeffrey Dahmer. That guy is still into that stuff. He's extremely wired. Someone should check on him. And if he has some skeletons somewhere of children, he possibly, okay.
We don't know anything about that.
Yeah, we don't, but I hear you. I do think that he appears to need some help. He needs to go to therapy. Okay, let's go to, our Twitch subs. We've got Killa who says, I used to work for UPS in Syracuse, New Jersey back in the mid-90s. The running joke there was UPS still has unpaid slaves. Anna, your hair looks great, Dragon says. Cenk did a great job during the Destiny debate last night. I agreed. I watched it. I thought that he did a fantastic job. So if you guys missed that, you can check it out on YouTube somewhere. Just look for it. I'm sure it'll pop up. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. John, this story that we're about to get to is insane, but I also kind of get it. So you ready? All right. Do you ever partake in the devil's lettuce?
Yeah, I don't like smoking though.
Okay, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Let's get to the story. A woman in Washington, D.C., oh wow, okay. A woman in Washington, D.C. has sued her neighbor for smoking medicinal marijuana because the smell was irritating to her. And she just won her case. And look, to be fair, while some, like some of my friends, not me at all, happen to enjoy the skunky stench of marijuana, others do not appreciate it, okay? Others don't. Now, the man will have to stop using a prescribed treatment in his own apartment. So let's get to the details on what happened. Now, Judge Ebony Scott ruled late Monday that Josefa That is the person in question here, could not prove she is entitled to damages. She successfully made the case that the smell is a private nuisance, and Scott ordered Thomas Cackett to stop smoking. Now, Scott said that Cackett is licensed to buy marijuana, but he does not possess a license to disrupt the full use and enjoyment of one's land. That is
such a Stewie thing to say.
Of one's land.
I need full use and enjoyment of my land.
Yeah. Okay, so more. Scott wrote in her decision, this is the judge. Indeed, the public interest is best served by eliminating the smoking nuisance and the toxins that it deposits into the air, toxins that involuntary smokers have no choice but to inhale. I feel like Ebony Scott, I don't know if there's any evidence indicating that this woman who sued was inhaling toxins because she could smell marijuana. But I will admit, marijuana, especially if you're smoking flower, if you are consuming flower, is smelly, very smelly. If you live in an apartment building, it's very likely that your hallways will end up, if you're smoking inside, it's gonna get into the hallways. I don't have any experience with this whatsoever, but neighbors are gonna complain. I know nothing about it.
No HOA trubs.
I mean, I've heard stories. But I do like to be considerate of my neighbors. So I don't know, where do you stand on this so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that it's prescribed for medical treatment, I think adds a very different wrinkle to this. In theory, there are other things that someone could need to use, machines that they might need to use for medical purposes that could provide some sort of nuisance to other people in the area. Look, clearly it's bothering her, and I get it.
Okay.
Like, people don't like smoke, but there's no other solution. There's no fans that could be set up, no.
But hold on.
Basket of potpourri that could be set up, nothing that could be done to minimize the smoke or the smell. It's just you cannot smoke anymore.
You make a good point in referencing and reminding everyone that we're not just talking. Okay, we're not just talking about some random person who likes to recreationally use marijuana. This is prescribed for the individual's ailments, and marijuana does have medicinal value. However, there are other options too in terms of consuming marijuana that are, to be quite frank, are healthier than simply smoking the flower. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
there are ways to vaporize the product so it doesn't smell. There are edibles. So there are other solutions too. I don't know if it's too burdensome to ask the
Is there a price difference?
Defendant
you clearly
in this
know
case
way more about this than me.
Yeah, I mean, edibles tend to be cheaper.
Yeah, but do edibles provide the same medicinal benefit? I honestly don't know. Look, I think that I'm seeing a head shake says no.
No?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, look, that's the thing. I think marijuana impacts people differently in some cases. So for me, edibles have longer, it lasts longer and it feels stronger.
My Twitter bio, actually. Look, I think that eating edibles is only 1,000 times better than smoking. I honestly don't really understand why smoking is still a thing. Once we were able to turn it into a candy,
I love a joint.
That should be the end of everything else.
I love a joint. I love a joint. No. Like, I get it because I don't know. There's just something about it. I love it.
Yeah, you know what's great? Something that you enjoy. Did you just set it on fire and breathe it? That's better.
Yeah.
No, it's not. But again, if it doesn't actually provide the medical benefit, then I don't know what the condition this guy has. He might be dealing with cancer or chronic pain or.
So first, let's hear from the woman. Okay, so the 76-year-old, she seems to over-exaggerate this a little bit. So she argued during the trial in January. This went to trial, folks. But anyway, she argued during the trial in January that she has faced health problems, including difficulty sleeping ever since she noticed the smell of marijuana, which is legal in the district in her Cleveland Park home. Okay, so that sounds like a bit of an exaggeration. I can't imagine someone
be sensitive.
Maybe. She said the owner of the adjoining home, okay, has allowed Cackett, who rents a ground level accessory apartment. I don't know what that is. It sounds ridiculous, but nonetheless, accessory apartment. To smoke without consequences. So that neighbor who's allowing Cackett to smoke without consequences responded that they have no legal responsibility for the plaintiffs' ailments here. They all have difficult names to pronounce, so that's why I'm not even attempting it, okay? So public health experts say it's true that secondhand marijuana smoke has some of the same cancer-causing toxins as tobacco.
Yeah.
But federal government's classification, the federal government's classification of marijuana as a Schedule I drug has made it difficult to actually do the appropriate studies on marijuana. So that is also an issue here.
That's a good point. Yeah, this is a mildly difficult one. I don't think that people should be inconvenienced. I don't think that they should be denied the full use and enjoyment of their land. But it is a health thing, and I feel like I don't know the nature of the argument that led up to this. I imagine it was for months. It was probably acrimonious. There's got to be some sort of solution, something you could blow the smoke into, something you could do to make the smell outside of the apartment better. Like we got to be able to come to some sort of conclusion. And maybe he didn't want to do them, or maybe they tried them and they failed. But this seems like an extreme response.
I just think housing density is the problem here.
It's possible.
And no, but seriously, like obviously there's a need for housing density. We need more housing. I'm not making a serious argument against that. However, it will make life more difficult because you're sharing a space with all sorts of people who have all sorts of issues, right? Whether in this case, we're talking about someone who needs medicinal marijuana. Yes, medicinal marijuana, flower specifically, smells when you smoke it. In other cases, there are other annoyances, right? For instance, my literal next door neighbor, they moved in last year and the HOA gave them a lot of problems because it's a married couple. The man in the relationship likes to smoke cigarettes. And it smells bad.
Yeah.
I don't like complaining.
In your apartment?
So, no, not in, as long as it doesn't smell in my apartment, I don't care, right? But the hallways, pretty bad, pretty bad. Anyway, the HOA made a big deal about it and they got them to essentially stop smoking within the unit. And now I don't smell it at all. I think that maybe some arrangements can be made. I feel terrible for this person who does need to make arrangements now. So Cackett testified in court that the medical marijuana relieves his pain and helps him sleep after physically intensive shifts as a restaurant manager. He said that he smoked about 8 to 12 puffs at night after he gets off work, typically outside if the weather was tolerable. And he denied smoking all day and all night, as the plaintiff alleges. But for those who do smoke all day and all night, as long as you're getting your work done, it's all right. No judgment.
And maybe there's maybe he could walk a little bit further away or something, but you're probably not allowed to do it outside.
He said during his trial, I am not Snoop Dogg.
And let it be known.
Yeah. Look, I think that there need to be more studies into secondhand marijuana smoke. I'm willing to believe that it could be toxic and damaging to the person who is inhaling the secondhand smoke. But I also want to just note again, there are other options for consumers of marijuana. We all know this. And so when we're living in buildings together, when we're sharing spaces together, we do need to be considerate of our neighbors, as annoying as that might be in some cases. But I have been curious about what would happen if neighbors start complaining about the smell of marijuana smoke. And at least in the case of Washington, D.C., the plaintiff won her case, took it to trial, won her case. I'm sure we're gonna see more cases like this popping up all across the country. Any final thoughts, John?
Yeah, I've long been worried that you could face issues with the HOA either for the smell of marijuana or the pervasive sound of a tiny little deer running around at all hours of the day. And I'm glad that so far you've evaded accountability.
Oh, everybody loves Charlie in my
family. They do?
Oh, not really.
He is very cute, that's true.
I mean, everyone should love Charlie, but I'm sure there's a few that are like, my dog's not as cute, so
I'm jealous and angry. That's probably what it is.
All right, we have an insane story for our members in the bonus episode, tyt.com/join to become a member. We're gonna talk about how there's a reemergence of something awful in the airline industry because these flights didn't feel enough like torture chambers. So we're gonna tell you what's going on when we come back for our members only bonus episode, tyt.com/join to become one. Everyone else, you have an excellent night. And yeah, I'm gonna end the show like 30 seconds early.
Oh.
How about that? See you later.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere, that's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive